Hi guys, Asmo here, and today I'm going to reveal how I've made hundreds of divines with very little effort. The first strategy I'm going to show you is probably the laziest way you can farm currency in PoE, and most of the time while doing it, I was watching TV shows and streams at the same time. But if you want to put the effort in, then this strategy can also be taken to the next level by doubling, tripling, or even quadrupling the amount of currency per hour you can make if you combine it with other methods that I will explain later in this video. So what is the first strategy? AFK simulacrum farming, and I mean truly AFK, where you don't have to press any buttons to deal damage, and the only thing you're doing is repositioning your character every now and then and clicking to activate the next wave. AFK simulacrums are all about your character. There are 4 main types of builds that can potentially do this: high investment summoner builds, word loop or mana loop builds, various automation supports, typically ignite based, and cast when stunned setups. You also need to make sure that you have good coverage and ideally some form of lingering damage, especially for the latter 2 setups. At first I've tried things like Ice Spear of Splitting with cast when stunned. Unfortunately it didn't have good enough coverage despite shooting a huge amount of projectiles, and only worked well when I was surrounded by a large amount of monsters. Otherwise the cast rate was just too low. So I swapped to Detonate Dead and Cremation, skills that are typically very good in simulacrums and are currently some of the strongest abilities in the entire game. This worked much better, but there was another obstacle, because initially I wanted to play a crit based Inquisitor with the easy access to Consecrated Ground and large amounts of crit. It was very easy to become element immune and get huge amount of damage. However, the tankiness was the issue. I was still able to tank the whole simulacrum pounding on me with no issues thanks to the Defiance of Destiny and Petrified Blood setup, but there was one ability that kept killing me: the Teleport Detonation by Colossus. This ability deals physical and elemental damage, and it delivers a very large hit that doesn't leave any room for recovery, and it was simply one-shotting me. So I needed to increase my physical as well as elemental max hit, and it needed to be consistent without relying on Molten Shell or Enduring Cry damage reduction, which were not always up. To solve this, I swapped to the Juggernaut and incorporated Divine Flesh. Juggernaut provided me with more armor and endurance charges for the physical max hit, and combining Divine Flesh with the 4th Vow allowed me to mitigate much more elemental damage, because now we negate half of the enemy's elemental penetration, as well as use armor in addition to resistances to lower the incoming damage. Divine Flesh also allowed me to get higher chaos resistance, which is very useful for simulacrums that consistently feature this type of damage in abundance. With this build, I was able to AFK 30 waves of simulacrum every single time without having to pay attention to anything. My character is now level 99 and 70% of the way to level 100 because it just doesn't die, and I was able to catch up on the latest episodes of Peppa the Pig at the same time. But here's where the strategy gets even better. If you have a build that can AFK farm simulacrums, that means you can simply just open your inventory while fighting the monsters and focus on crafting at the same time. It's like that meme with Mozart at 2 times speed in one ear and the Bible being read in Chinese in the other ear for maximum learning efficiency. You can maximize your time and do 2 things at the same time and make way more currency while farming at the same time. While crafting in simulacrum, you're going to be limited to your inventory and you will have access to stash in between the waves. Here are some ideas for what you can craft while doing those wave 30 sims. Flasks, which require the bases, alterations, augmentations, annuls, and enkindling orbs. You can also craft cluster jewels, which requires the bases, alchemies, scours, exalts, and annuls. And also you can craft magic jewels for the adorned, which requires the base, alterations, augmentations, and annuls. All of these can be very profitable and relatively easy to craft. Particularly time-consuming crafts that require a lot of simple rolling with basic currencies can be done very effectively in simulacrums. I wouldn't advise more complicated crafts or things that like Stygian Vices or boots, because with those you want to have consistent access to bestiary crafts if you want to be at all efficient. So stick to the crafts that can be repeatedly done with just the basic currencies that you can have in your inventory. I personally crafted a lot of magic jewels and flasks, and I still have over 100 divines worth of them for sale. Even when profits from simulacrum are not as great as the best mapping strategies, just the crafts themselves can surpass the typical income that you could expect from mapping. So this strategy should be always viable as long as you have the right character. And what makes the right character? I'm going to show you exactly how I've set up my Juggernaut so that you can learn to replicate it yourself right after you click the like button. And just to make it more interesting, I'll be doing it while farming the last 10 waves of simulacrum at the same time. I'll go over the gems, items, passives, and of course every cluster jewel and jewel setup that we have. And let's start the wave and talk over the gems first. So we're gonna stand here and kill everything while I'm going over this. So the first setup that I have is the Cremation of Exhuming plus the Unearth. Both of these benefit from extra projectiles, so we have greater multiple projectiles linked with it. We also have cast when stunned, of course, and life tap plus awakened elemental focus. The life tap is necessary because we don't want to spend mana for other reasons that I'll explain later. So that has to be, it's basically mandatory. The cast when stunned is also mandatory, and awakened elemental focus because we're not really relying on ignite or shock or anything. So it's just the most damage that we can get. Then we have the other cast when stunned setup for also damage that involves detonate dead of chain reaction. So in this one, we have awakened fire penetration because we don't need to have the extra projectiles. We also have cast when stunned, concentrated effect, awakened elemental focus, and a life tap as well because we need the cost to be basically negated. Then for the setup in the helmet, we have Arctic armor. Let me pick up this stuff. Actually, there's just random garbage here. Let's click on that. So let's talk about the helmet setup. So in the helmet, we have Arctic armor because we are most of the time stationary. So same with our pantheons. We have the Soul of Solaris as well as Soul of Yugul. Soul of Tukohama is better at a little bit lower levels of gear, and Soul of Yugul is something that I'm running now to mitigate the curses on top of everything else because I already have enough regen and I have already enough physical damage reduction. So Arctic armor. Then we have the Purity of Elements to deal with ailments. There are many different ways of dealing with ailments, but because we're also running the Annihilating Light, which lowers our resistances, this is very, very useful because we're able to mitigate that downside with the aura as well. Other than that, we also have Determination and Vitality level 15 for just some extra regen because we had the extra reservation. Then we have this setup here with another cast when stunned setup. We have Desecrate as well as Life Tap and also Infernal Cry, which is not going off automatically. You'd have to have the Ancestral Call with it, but if I'm standing next to the boss, I can press it quickly just to get this extra covered in ash to deal more damage to the boss. Next setup is the another cast when stunned setup. We have so many of them. Punishment, which is the Curse of Choice, and I'm gonna explain punishment a little bit. A lot of the time, you're going to be killing everything just very, very easily because you do huge amount of damage where there's a lot of enemies. But sometimes you will have like Colossus spawn next, or you can see like this monster was like half HP and there was no other monsters, so I wasn't doing a lot of casts, right? The cast rate goes down as the enemies are going down. So if you have like just the boss left and you took him to like half HP, but you don't have like any monsters hitting you other than the boss itself, so you're gonna need the extra damage when enemies are at a low life. So 60% increased damage taken is a huge amount. Plus it also gives you Debilitate, which is a huge defensive layer. It's absolutely massive. Then we also have Steel Skin just to deal with the bleed plus some extra damage reduction, but mainly for the bleed, and also Life Tap to make everything castable. So that's basically the gem setup. Now when it comes to the items, this is where things get a little bit interesting. So Annihilating Light, since we're not crit, this is like one of the best ways to increase the damage on any kind of caster. The good thing is that it also allows you to deal triple damage with elemental skills, not with spells, because like the Detonate Dead, for example, the spell component is separate from the Corpse Explosion component, and the Corpse Explosion doesn't count as a spell. So for example, spell crit chance doesn't work, and like increased spell damage doesn't work, and things like that. So that's why the like triple damage with elemental skills is very, very powerful. Plus it gives me another 6 link so that I can have this set up with the Unearth and Cremation of Exhuming as well. Then we have the Fourth Vow, which I already explained. The +1 to all maximum resistance corruption is very nice because it also increases the Chaos Res, which is very valuable. And as you can see, we have now 84, 84, 83, 84. And even though I'm playing Divine Flesh and I have the same like max res elemental as Chaos, it is still worth getting these elemental resistances. It does help, like every bit helps. But the priority is getting actually the Chaos Res as high as possible. Then we have Defiance of Destiny. This is just huge. You can, like, if you have the extra sockets, you could run, for example, a setup with Petrified Blood. This is what I was running earlier. Petrified Blood is very powerful with Defiance of Destiny, but we definitely need to worry about max hit more than like any recovery. Recovery, we have like way more than we need. Max hit is the only thing that is like like necessary to take care of in this, so that we don't die to the Kossus teleport explosion. But yeah, the Fires of Destiny is absolutely broken. We're anointing Prismatic Skin for extra max res. There are other anoints you can do as well. It's like there are some other. It's basically slightly better than Soul of Steel. I looked at Soul of Steel and it was like about the same. So the elemental hit is what I wanted to bump up, so that's why I got the Prismatic Skin. Next unique that we have is the Valerium. So Valerium is very interesting. There is the interaction that we're using. Maybe this is a good time to explain the cast when stand mechanic a little bit. So because this is all gonna go together. Cast when stand has certain things you need to take care of. One thing that you need to take care of is the cast rate, right? So we have a cast rate of 0.1, right? 0.1 cooldown, right? So you can see that the cooldown by default is 0.1. However, you'd think that that gives you 10 casts per second. It doesn't. Because of the server ticks, you actually get like between 7 and 8 casts per second if you're getting just pounded by monsters with infinite attacks. So you actually need a little bit of cooldown reduction. You actually need 2% CDR in order to get the real like 0.1% cast rate, right? If you want to have 10 casts per second, you need 2% cooldown reduction. The next breakpoint after 2% cooldown reduction is 52, and that's what I have, right? So 52% cooldown reduction gives you 15 casts per second. So it basically gives you 50% more damage if you're getting hit fast enough. So we have a belt that has 20% cooldown recovery, we have boots that have 20% cooldown recovery, and then we also have 2 jewels with 3% multiplied, like doubled with adorned, 100% adorned, which is very cheap, and that gives me 52% cooldown reduction. Let me just dump stuff into inventory so that we can keep picking things up, and then I'm going to explain the rest of the build. So this is the cast rate of cast when stunned, but there is more to this mechanic than just the cast rate. The next thing is the actual hits that are able to stun you. So first of all, we're making it so that stun threshold is based on energy shield instead of life. We have 0 energy shield because we are using the agnostic. So the agnostic makes it so that we have 0 energy shield. So every single hit stuns you, right? However, if the monster is doing cold damage and it crits, that hit is not capable of stunning, right? Like by default, the game works in a way where a crit hit of a cold damage does not stun. So what we need to do is make sure that we're not getting crit, right? We like taking reduced damage from crits is actually not that good. I saw people like play this build with the 4th vow and taking reduced damage taken from crits. That is actually not the play because you're losing some stuns, right? You're losing some stuns and you're actually not getting stunned by hits that are criticals with cold damage. So what you need to do is actually spec into a stun mastery with hits against you cannot be critical strikes if you've been stunned recently. This mastery is needed to achieve a true 100% rate of getting stunned, and that's what we're running. So that's why we're pathing toward this stun mastery. It gives me some stun and block recovery, it gives me some regen if I've been stunned, and it also gives me the impossible, like enemies cannot crit me, right? As long as I've been in the past 4 seconds stunned, which means as long as I've been hit in the past 4 seconds, I cannot be crit, which is much better than the reducing of the crit damage. As you can see, I'm not doing anything. I've been staring at my passive tree and I got 5 rewards in Simulacrum already in this wave, right? So the build has pretty good coverage, pretty good clear. If you increase the AoE even more, Enlighten is leveling. We're leveling gems at the same time as well. So I can show you after we clear this wave what I'm doing to level the gems. But yeah, so that's basically the cast when stunned mechanics. So now let's move on to the rest of the items, and I can show you also we're leveling the gems. You can use Maloney's mechanism. There used to be a 6-socket Maloney mechanism. I wasn't using that because I think actually everybody abusing bugs like that should be banned. It sets a bad precedent for GG to not be banning people for abusing like blatant bugs. But that's their decision, I guess. I would just ban everybody using this. I don't care if I would ban 10,000 players. It's the time of the league where that wouldn't really make much difference. because people will be that they're doing this will be quitting anyway. But that's besides the point. Let's talk about the rest of the items to explain the build. So I already talked about the belt and the boots, which have 20% cooldown reduction. So I got Dex, Life, we got some flask effect duration because we're relying on just regular flasks that have it's a flagellant, right? Flagellant modifier that gives me 3 charges when I'm hit by an enemy, which means they're basically all the time up. They go down sometimes when I'm just fighting lone boss, like at the end of the wave when I'm just finishing up the boss. That's when they can go down, but it doesn't really matter because we still survive without them as well. So that's what we have on the belt, and then as a jewel we're using strength and dex for some requirements. We got armor and life, life regen, chaos res, and then the chance to avoid being shocked is just a random. And then we have boots, again dex, because we need a bunch of dexterity for the cremation of exhuming, greater multiple projectiles on earth, right? So these things have some dexterity requirements. Then we also have arctic armor that has some dex requirements, desecrate, and detonate dead of chain reaction. They have some dex requirements, so we need a little bit of dex. If you, for example, are in a situation like this and you're not like AFKing, you actually want to kill this guy faster, what you can do is you can take out the cast when stunned, and then I can simply cast my cremation. I can also use the war cry, and I need to actually cast the cremation, not just pretend I casted the cremation. And then we cast the unearth, and we can simply just play as if we are playing a regular build and cast our spells. So you can actually bypass the cast when stunned. This was wave 29, I think. We got 6 rewards, so it's not bad. This doesn't really get to 7 rewards ever, but 5-6 rewards is good enough for AFK farming in my opinion, so I'm happy with that. So this is wave 30. I don't look at the mods, doesn't really matter. If you get like fire res, I purposefully respec here for the elemental mastery, for the inversion, to do more damage against that. But yeah, let's finish with the items. So I covered the belt, now the boots. The boots have also elevated cooldown reduction. This is deterministic to craft. I might make another video talking about how to craft these things, or you can go to the Discord. I might explain that as well if you ask me there. But cooldown reduction, chaos res, dexterity, life, armor, movement speed. Randomly got the onslaught on it as well, which doesn't really matter, but that's what we got on the boots. Everything is basically armor basis. I want as much armor as possible, so I have quality on these also bumped up pretty high. So you have 29 quality, we have 28 quality, 29 quality, and so on. Then on the gloves are super simple. So we've got cold, chaos, lightning res, all T1. We've got life and armor, T1 armor, T2 life, and then we also have crafted prefix damage, increased damage during any flask effect, fire damage leached as life for extra recovery, and +1 to max cold res. Very simple glove with just basic stats on it. And then for the helmet, there is of course the physical damage taken as elemental. So we have fist taken as elemental implicit, we have fist taken as elemental craft, chaos res, mana reservation efficiency, T1 res, T3 life armor. This is again very standard thing to craft. You can ask me in the Discord, I can explain that there as well, but this is just very standard craft that you should know by now how to do. Yeah, we got a bunch of split personalities. There's lots of currency that we're getting here in these. Sometimes you get nothing, like in this simulacrum I got like divine at the beginning, I got some megalomaniac and stuff like that. Sometimes you get good stuff, sometimes you don't, but the good thing about it is that it's passive, right? It's very passive, and all of this stuff I can do while also crafting, right? So also the ring, that's the last thing that we have here. Just resists, right? So resists, life, mana, minus mana cost. We need some minus mana cost for previous version. I needed the minus mana cost. Right now I don't really need this craft because I'm not really using mana. So at this point this craft I probably should replace with something else. And that's it when it comes to the gear. Flasks are very straightforward. You got ruby, topaz, sapphire, and then granite and basalt, right? So we just got all the elemental and then both armor flasks because that's what we care. We got increased armor on suffixes, damage taken is leech as life during effect craft, regen craft, extra elemental resistances just to overcap for the exposure, and then we also have reduced effect of curses on me, which together with the Pantheon gives me, what is it, 91% reduced effective curses on me, so they basically don't do shit. And that's it when it comes to the gear. Now let's talk about the passives. This is also pretty interesting. There is many different ways. I tried many different setups. I tried Inquisitor, I tried Juggernaut, and this is what I've arrived at. The first thing that we have here is the Divine Flesh coming from the Glorious Vanity. So this is a 3606. There are many different ones. What you're looking for is basically good nodes on this thing, because these are notables that take only one passive point to grab. So you can see here I have 6% life and regen, I have armor and PDR. You can have +2 chaos resistance and max chaos resistance. You can have lots of good stuff. I also have things like increased fire damage. We have also increased fire damage here. We have skill effect duration, maximum life. So there is lots of good stuff you can get even on these. Like some of these would be worth taking. Like for example, lightning res, max life and regen, right? This is not too bad. There's a lot of stuff that could be potentially worth taking. So I definitely recommend using like a Timeless Jewel calculator or using the POB Timeless Jewel search tool in order to find a good one for yourself. But what you care about is mainly the Divine Flesh, right? The Divine Flesh, I already explained, just gives us more Chaos Res and also more Elemental max hit, because we are able to turn it into Chaos Res and then armor applies to Chaos Res. The next thing we're pathing for is this setup here. On an Inquisitor, I was using a different setup here with Militant Faith, and I had basically the node that gives you ailment immunity if you're on consecrated ground, very good with Inquisitor. But since we are not playing Inquisitor, we're not relying on that, we're instead running Purity of Elements, then we can take advantage of the Perandus Pact. Perandus Pact with increased fire damage. I also got one with Fire Pen Corruption. This is huge because we're getting not only the nodes that we are allocating in here, but we are also getting everything from the Unnatural Instinct. So you can see it's 126% increased fire damage from this Unnatural Instinct. And it also gives me max life. It also gives me 36% increased AoE, skill effect duration, really good stuff. Then let's path further here. We got a reduced cost of skills. This is cool because this is a reduced cost, not reduced mana cost. So it applies to life cost as well. And then pathing up, we got extra endurance charge because we are stacking endurance charges. We're getting 6 of them for nice extra physical damage reduction. We also have the inversion mastery I talked about, the agnostic, so that we turn off energy shield and can get stunned with every single hit. Aura nodes, alive, and the stun mastery, very, very important. And then we're pathing to a cluster jewel here, cluster jewel here, and a cluster jewel here. And these cluster jewels are giving me smoking remains, that's 35% increased fire damage, and then prismatic heart, increased elemental damage, and also elemental resistances. And this is what I have in every single one of them: prismatic heart, smoking remains. And then on some of these, ideally you'd get like dexterity. I have dexterity on one of them, I have res on another one of them. We also are using Born of Chaos for max chaos res. And then we're using, let me show you first the unique jewels. So we've got a Blood Notch, which means 60% of the damage taken from stunning hits is recovered as life. That gives me a huge amount of recovery. So you can see I have the Leech, right? We have Leech from this, we have Leech from the gloves. So we are leeching constantly. We are regening. I have huge amount of regen as well. We have huge amount of mitigation. We get the Defiance of Destiny recovery, and we have the Blood Notch recovery. So much recovery. It is pretty much impossible for this character to die in simulacrums. Then we also have Immutable Force for increased stun and block recovery. I have also increased stun and block recovery in here. So this makes it so that you basically don't feel getting stunned. You can just walk around and you don't really feel like you're getting stunned at all. Then we have the magic jewels for the Adorned. So we have Adorned in here with 108. Let's see, how much does Adorned like that cost? 100%. If you just look for 100% Adorned, this costs 1 divine, right? So people think Adorned is very, very expensive to set up. If you just get 100%, which is all you need for this build, it costs 1 divine. So we're using this magic jewel with the cooldown recovery rate, and I just got fire damage to spells on it because I basically rolled these myself, right? So whatever was like a useful mod that I got on a suffix, that's what I kept. So we got 3% cooldown recovery here, which gives me 6, and then 3% here, which gives me another 6, plus also phasing randomly, which helps actually walking around simulacrum in between monsters. So that's actually very, very useful. Then we have here Corrupted Blood Jewel with extra attributes and maximum life. And then we have a magic jewel with maximum life and area damage. There's lots of different things you can get. A very cool thing to get for this strategy, especially if you're like farming AFK, is this one. Inexorable, 25% chance to gain endurance charge when you're hit, which is fine, but also 50% increased armor while stationary, and then a mastery that gives me 100% increased armor while stationary, right? So these two nodes are 150% increased armor while stationary. That's a huge amount of armor, and you can see I got 52k armor without any flasks, without anything active, just by default if I'm stationary. If I start moving, I got 34, right? So this is 15k armor, and this keeps increasing as you stand stationary for a few seconds, and a huge amount of armor from these nodes. And lastly, for damage, we're also running the elemental overload because we are not relying on scaling crit at all. We just want to increase our damage in the most efficient way because we're investing in many other things here, mainly the defenses, and a huge part of the defenses is the ascendancy as well. So we got untiring. This is increased life regeneration rate for a huge amount of regen. Physical damage prevented from hits, also regenerated as life. Armor increased, armor applying to elemental resistances. So this portion applies to the elemental part of the hit that we're taking, and then from the fourth vow we're applying armor to the chaos damage of the elemental hit that we're taking. Unflinching for endurance charges, +1 endurance charge, and also additional physical damage reduction, and reduced elemental damage taken, as well as some extra chaos rest. Chaos rest is actually not needed because we are way overcapped. And that is the whole setup. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you've learned something new, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.